you're alone and weak, but I'm just as cool as I am geek. Missed your power, I am on fleek. This time I won't be crying. No, I'm not buying. You know the slide is the moves that I'm supplying. I'll take my glasses. I'm gonna bounce back up and kick some asses. I'm about to call your bluff. You think you own me? You don't control me. You think you hurt me, saying that I'm freaky. You're just afraid I'm in a state. Not gonna be that kid who won't do it. You think you own me. You don't control me. You think you hurt me, saying that I'm freaky. You're just afraid I'm in a state. Just 'cause I did it when I should've walked away. You think you own me. You don't control me. Scared of you? No. What's up, James? How's everybody? I have some things to share, but first, music mediumship. Although, I heard something earlier clairaudiently. Make themselves scant, I heard. And so, the vampires, they're in for some rude awakenings because I'm a master alchemist, high priestess, empress, goddess. So at this point, when they exert all of their nasty energy at me, trying to bait and switch, I turn it into something positive for me, for us. I alchemize it, but they burned themselves out trying. Whoops. Talk about an Uno reverse. For the energy vampires, how do you like me now? Probably a lot less. But I know a lot of you just can't help but have respect at this point, even though you hate it. Like, damn, she got us good. Toodles. And that's for the vamps and the trolls. Greetings. What's up? Oh, somebody's angry. Why are you so angry? Oh, yeah, there it is. I hate her. Oh, so angry. Okay, well, it is what it is. Say love you, right? I think that bothers me. No. You're playing with dangerous spirits in high places. Baby, I am a dangerous spirit in high places. Don't play with me. I'd say good try, but it wasn't. Thanks for the giggle, though. Ow! Popped a bone out of place. Popped it back, though. Gotcha.
One of my viewers recommended this a few weeks ago, and I haven't been able to forget it. Keeps coming up.
These words are my own.
How are you, Maxie?
Threw some chords together. The combination D-E-F is who I am, is what I do. And I was gonna lay it down for you. I tried to focus my attention, but I feel so empty. I need some help, some inspiration, but it's not coming easily. Trying to find the magic, trying to write a classic. Don't you know, don't you know, don't you know? Waves been full of paper.
Manifesting.
I'm seeing later. These words are my own, from my heart flow. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. There's no other way to better say I love you, love you. Read some books, Shelley and Keats recited it over a hip-hop beat. I'm having trouble saying what I mean with
Yeah, I bet.
chords and drum machines.
Reality
You know I
telling us.
had some studio time books, but I
Are you getting rest now?
now you're gonna raise the bar right up. Nothing I write is ever. These words are mine, from my heart's flow. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. There's no other way to better say I love you, I love you. From my heart, so I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. So other way to better say I love you, love you. I'm getting off my stage.
I love you.
Just pull away, you know I don't want to wait.
Okay. That one was, gosh, from a few weeks ago, the viewer recommend. Let's do. I heard this a couple times today, clairaudiently. What are you doing, little monkey? Hi, Freya, what's up? Thank you. I heard that yesterday. Smoke show or something like that. She's a smoke show. Heard it clairaudiently.
I know this year wasn't anything close to what I know. But you ain't the kind that'll cry and ask for help. Promises break and the seasons they change, that's how life goes. But you don't gotta deal with the pain all by yourself. So show me where your heart is scarred. All the trauma that you're keeping from the light, things you bury in the dark. Feel you locked up in the fortress of your eyes. Show me all the insecure ways that break a guarded heart. 'Cause I love every part. Show me where to start.
It's nice
Know
to
how
see
it
you.
feels when your mind's in a downward spiral. But you're not as low or alone as you think you are.
Thank you.
When you see hopeless, I see soul revival.
I heard this in the shower today. This particular line.
But you're not as low or alone as you think you are. When you see hopeless, I see soul revival. Where you see broken, I see a work of art. So show me where you hide your scars. All the trauma that you're keeping from the light, things you
to put the request on the queue for later, but I have a divine time limit tonight. So we're going to see what we can get through first, and we'll see where we get with that. Here, another one too. We'll save those. Somebody's angry. I heard this earlier. Also, clear out again, Layman.
If you wanna play it like a game, well come on, let's play. I notice your eyes are always glued to me. Keep them here and it makes no sense at all. They taped over your mouth, they scribbled out the truth with their lies, your little spies. They taped over your mouth, scribbled out the truth with their lies, your little spies.
I know who's lurking. Think I don't know? I feel that too. Silly geeks. I also heard this one. I heard there was some archangelic advice earlier. And they said to me, as far as this goes, in the queue tonight, when in doubt, play a love song. All right, let's reroute.
You're my soulmate, you're my ride or die. I know what you like.
Thank you.
I know what you like. Oh, I'm all about you. 'Cause baby, you're my soulmate, the love of my life. The love of my life. It's hard to explain what I feel. I don't wanna leave without you another day. If you'd only see what I see, you turn on my darkness into a better place. I feel my heart is beating when you were close to me. Don't wake me, I'm not dreaming. Baby, you're my soulmate, you're my ride or die. I know what you like, I know what you like. Oh, I'm all about you. 'Cause baby, you're my soulmate, the love of my life, the love of my life. It's hard to explain what you mean to me. You're the one who sees who I really am. Baby, you're there when I need to be. In your arms, you make me a better man. It's like my heart is beating when you were close to me. Don't wake me, I'm not dreaming. Baby, you're my soulmate, you're my ride or die. I know what you hate, and I know what you like. Oh, I'm all about you. 'Cause baby, you're my soulmate, the love of my life, the love of my life, the love of my life. Oh, I'm all about you. You
Does anybody else feel that? Jeepers creepers, where'd you get them peepers? Jeepers creepers. Hey, where'd you get them eyes?
Bundle and
When in doubt, play a love song. It's much higher frequency than their nonsense. Spooks them when I pick up that they're there, though. I feel you. Your energy's garbage. It's shifting too. Now they're upset. Now they're trying to attack the throat and like the solar plexus a little bit and the sacral because they're upset that I spoke. How do you know I'm here? Because your energy's foul and I see you. I heard that. How can you see me? I'm hiding behind a screen. Yeah, no, you're not. You think you are. Physically, on the human plane, but you're not. Stay seated.
Feeling the sun, party done, shadows walking home. Walking with a game on. You are my kind, classic mind, and you look so fine. Loving the cold, smoking rose, see your fingers shake. And getting through your heartbreak. So kind of free, sing for me, don't know what I need. Don't doubt me, babe, you make me wanna change. Break my bed to make me wanna stay. I can't buy me, babe, you make me love the pain. Break my bed to make me wanna stay. I can't. When you say got me falling back. When you say it like that, let me fall right back. Get in the door, silent walk was the first to speak. Speaking like a real freak, voice in my head, in my bed, filled with you and
I'm also picking up that like our joy or peace, just vibe sessions, happiness, whatever it is, it's making them upset and the energy shifting, it's going back up to here. Okay? First, there was a mixed bag of energy, but I spoke on it and they wanted to try to shut it up. And then I said, I see you. And then they tried to, now they're here, trying to hit here and like here and here. No. I have all of the clairs. All of my chakras are just fine. And you're having a hard time because you're being a karmic. During Mercury retrograde, which is when your karma comes back to you, it's trying to teach you to stop being an asshole, but you're doing more of that because you're mad that the consequences of your actions for being an asshole are not very fun for you. I get it. It's not fun, is it? The universe forcing you to sit down and face your shadow wounds, while the rest of us have been doing ours on purpose. You cannot compete where you never compared. Stay seated. You're a joke. What a joke you are.
taking your time, work my mind, and I'll play with you. And play pretend it's all true. Follow me down, listen round to the deep dark sound. Don't doubt me, babe,
Also,
you make
they've been trying very hard with the algorithm suppression tactics. I picked it up a few weeks ago as a tactic that was coming through, and it happened subsequently, right? Like they started doing it after I picked it up. So the flip side of that is it's not going to work out the way that they want it to. And I believe that that's also what's making them, in some cases, more upset. They know that or they fear that. I hear the truth coming out. They're upset about the truth coming out. Also, last night, the drive-by stalking from one of the losers sent by the domestic abuser started up again. And I didn't even mention this, but I noticed some hacking attempts again through the week. So they've been trying all their tactics, and we know that they just used, or tried to use the full moon rather, and the full blood moon at that during an eclipse to place some kind of spell work or control tactics on people. But also, like I said, this is Mercury retrograde. It's very much like a Saturn return. The kickback on that is not nice. It's like instant karma. But it's not instant karma. It's the lesson returning to them to see if they learned it. It's their consequences for all the other times they failed that lesson coming back to them, and then an even heavier penalty for them choosing to fail it again. Pretty much. Some of them are scared because they know this is the truth. Some of them are, I'm picking up a mixed bag of energy on these karmics now, feeling like just sat down and defeated. And there's some that are trying to do that mocking, like retaliative, trying to poke and combat everything I'm saying, like deny what I'm saying, speak in opposition to it. Whether they really believe it or not, I'm curious. They're either delusional or they know that I'm telling the truth. They're just trying to do that thing where they argue just to argue, even when they're wrong. Even when they know they're wrong, they just don't want to admit it. It's an ego thing. Or in some cases, they're hoping it's like false confidence to flip the narrative based on that. They're being cleansed out. Salt. Someone has ill thoughts and will towards you, but there's nothing they can do about it, not physically or spiritually. But they're so obsessed that they're wanting to, they cannot stop thinking about you. Right. They don't want you to have self-love, and they don't want you to have love for other people either. Let me tell you, honey, you don't want to get froggy with me. That wasn't the intention of these nails, P.S. I had a vision of these. I'm like, what am I going to do on this next set? And then I got a vision of frogs. I'm like, oh, I love that. Let's do that. So I did. And then while I was finishing up the last set and getting a couple of other things organized, I heard something about like getting froggy. Like you don't, it was a message to them, but it was like about me or in regards to me on behalf of me from my spirit team. You don't want to get froggy with her. I'm like, what do you mean get froggy? So I looked it up. Get froggy. Let's see, shall we? Just for fun. Get froggy or feeling froggy is urban slang for feeling energetic, more specifically anxious or reckless, often implying a readiness to fight, act aggressively, or take a bold risk. But the thing about that is, well, I know they wanted to come here and try to use me as a punching bag. They forgot that I'm spring-loaded, and I'll punch them back harder. Have you ever seen one of those, like speed bags, the spring-loaded? Yeah, you don't want to get hit with that when it's on the backswing. Talk about peeing up wind. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Do no harm, take no shit. However, also this is the reason that I speak on it, because I know that there are also good people watching and also people that need to know what's going on so that they can even call in protection or shields or just energetic cleansing for themselves. Look, it's backfiring on them. I told you, I split the deck. Not to be mean, but I just tried to tell them the truth. They just weren't ready to hear it. Struck a chord they didn't want to hear. You came to a music mediumship. What did you expect? Music mediumship session. What did you expect? A parade? There's still music at those. You want a cookie? Also, remember, when I have to whistleblow about the thieves and the bullies and the copycats, my numbers always dip. So the combination of, because YouTube notified me about their algorithm suppression tactics. But when I have to whistleblow on it, people don't like that. It's not good for the algorithm. So it always does that. Keep pushing. It's a temporary dip. As long as you're on the up and up, like Mercury retrograde, Artemis the Archeress. As long as you're focused appropriately. They're not focused appropriately. They're targeting us. They're trying to use us as target practice. Their focus is not on us. We're focused on trying to continue with our destiny path, our north nodes. They're so busy in their south nodes trying to block our north nodes that they don't even have north nodes, let alone know where to find them. Okay? If you know, you know. At this point, I think a lot of this is gibberish and over a lot of these people's heads. That's why they're in their north node, south node rather, in their karmic state of energy. In other words, in translation, they're so busy trying to block light workers from being light workers while they're stuck in a karmic space of energy doing that, that they will never get out of that karmic energy because they have nothing else. That's all that they are. So they're getting karma for it. They're getting kickback for that too. In layman's terms. Because some of those dum-dums needed to hear that. Competition where? And so imagine trying to focus all your energy on targeting somebody, which is the wrong, the universe says that is not where your focus of target should be. Imagine spending all of that time and energy or even resources of varieties trying to block somebody from being in their north node, in their purpose, only for them to come out on the other side of it, in their purpose or even higher in it, while their south node person is still stuck. How mad that they're going to be. Mercury retrograde is very much like a bow and arrow. This is how the divine shows it to me. As long as you're focused on the right target, on making your target, right? They're focused not on their proper target. They're focused on us. That's not it. They tried to make us a target. That's not where the universe wanted them. Somebody's super angry. And they try to stall out light workers and make things take longer or cause setbacks, hoping that they can get in people's heads so that they give up. because that's what they would do often. So they're trying to put people through things that would cause them to feel some kind of defeat or make them feel some kind of way. It's projection. Just so you have a bit of psychology behind it. And they're either rushing around to target us, which is a mistake, or they're spending all of their time and energy and resources trying to target us. They're still trying to target that throat chakra. They're mad. Both of which are a mistake. That is not where their focus should be. And we might have had to focus on pausing to recalibrate and protect ourselves, refocus, make sure that aim is proper. Not on them, like, yes, defend yourself, of course, if you need to, but on moving forward, on clearing out any obstacles, on continuing to hit goals, clear out old cycles, not allow their attempted permanent blockages to be anything more than a temporary pause, setback, stall period, right? Because even though everything seems to slow down on that note with the Mercury retrograde or pause for a time, things seem to be get stuck on levels, kind of forces you to deal with them or clear things out. Cycles, old people that you really don't have any business dealing with, etc. Situations, could be jobs even, whatever the case may be. Aspects of self, doing any healing work or self-reflection you need to do. It's kind of like a full moon energy. When you're focused on those positive things, even though they're trying to create chaos around you, or there is chaos around you, as long as you make sure to properly aim, keep your elbow up, make sure to angle yourself so you don't slap the string on your forearm when you release. It doesn't matter if it takes you a bit longer, as long as your aim is right. They're rushing to aim at us, and the universe, the divine, God, whatever, did not want us to be their target. So they already fucked up. They missed the mark. Train is off the tracks, which is why they're trying to derail other people. It does not matter if they were able to create stalls or blockages or set things back, because as long as you take that time to aim properly, to realign when there's something that's off, to recalibrate whatever needs balance, when Mercury comes out of retrograde, and you may still feel, I do, especially somebody who's so mercurial based, I feel the shadow transits. I feel, especially if they're strong retrogrades, I feel them usually at least a few weeks, sometimes a month or more in advance if they're really strong. And then also sometimes on the way out, depending on them. So if somebody's confused, there's the retrograde cycle from one date to the next, and then there's a shadow transit, meaning like the week or a few weeks following it afterwards. Or interesting, that's a good analogy kind of, but interesting. A few weeks usually before. And so it's like stepping off the battlefield. This is the analogy they just showed me, but still being able to hear the gunshots. It's like you're out of the line of fire, you're safe, but you can still hear it, they're still close, the enemy's still close, too close for comfort. You still need to keep moving, keep going. As we're talking about the chaos and the conflict that they were trying to create. And a lot of them were involved in some cases, criminal conspiracy, aspects of criminal conspiracy. And by the way, those types of crimes that they were committing against other U.S. citizens, while they're not classified as war crimes because it's not two separate countries actively warring, they are classified as crimes against humanity because they committed war zone, even tactics that are illegal in a war zone, against their own fellow citizens in their own country. So the crime is the same, the penalties are the same, In these cases, it's life in prison or the death penalty for these criminal conspiracy charges, which, by the way, is why there's been such a high-stakes motive to silence the victims and stalk and all the stuff, right? Oh, and by the way, also, last night I picked up a download about, like, murder plots. Like, straight up trying to... Somebody wants me off. They know they're toast. They know that the story's out, it's coming out. They can't make me be quiet or intimidate me into... No, they know they have to take accountability, and so now they're thinking, shit, how do I get out of this? I can't think of another way but to kill her. I'm not going anywhere but up. And I let people know, I let the authorities know what you were plotting, so I don't suggest you come by and try it. Stay off my property and away from my home. Crazy. You were crazy. Jeepers, creepers, where'd you get them papers? Somebody says, oh, so you've been dealing with a lot. Oh, I've been dealing with a lot more than that. Just quietly. Handling business, taking care of business. And it's been a journey, and I'd be making a lot more progress, a lot more quickly and efficiently, including on the healing front, if I had more support and less nonsense, but I'm still doing it and by myself. And some of my medical staff has been on vacation. So I could be doing worse. Could be doing better, but I could be doing worse. And I'm a healer, and they've done goofed and coming after a chosen one. Godaddy's favorite. There's that. Strangulation. Yeah, see, I told you, homicide. Yeah, I know what they're doing. The domestic abuser sent his friends to stalk my property again because they're looking to find me alone or find me in a spot where they think that they can... You know what I heard last night? The telepathy was, the last thing she ever sees. Yeah. I know what you're trying. I heard that all the time. She's good. Shush. No. Homicide. Strangulation. Now, he did used to pin me up against a wall, sometimes by my throat. Accident, fire, water. Look, told you. Road, assassination. Assassination. Yeah, I showed you some of these self-defense tools that I have right at my fingertips, right here. Some of them, which included a baseball bat and couple of cans of mace, actually. But you should not assume that I'm not strapped. You don't want to get froggy with me. Fire and water came out, also road. It's like trying to take somebody somewhere to burn them alive and then throw the rest of the remains overboard. Celebrity, right? Because I'm a whole lot celebrity to these people. They wanted to try to make me disappear. A karmic couple. Revenge. Child. natural disaster. Yeah. I've been picking that also up, like trying to make a murder or disappearance look like a natural disaster or like something, an accident or like just a random disappearance, but it's not. It's organized crime and they're trying to trap people. Let me see if I can try to back you in a corner. Didn't you just mention a cane corso? Mind control. They also want people to be trapped in their mind. In some cases, they're intimidation tactics. But I also know that there are murder plots in their heads, too. So, just so you know, I'm not suicidal. I'm not just planning to disappear. But there are people after me. Revenge, female party. This is also why I don't deal with locals. I don't take things or like food or anything from locals. I make everything myself. Party, female. In some cases, hey, let me invite you to this thing. But it's like, I'm already aware. Like, poison. People trying to spike or drug or drink something. You know what I mean? No. Jealousy. Tunnel. Meeting. So they're meeting up in a group. A bunch of jealous people meeting up to try to plot some kind of revenge, exact some kind of revenge. Either partying together and like at this, oh, the tunnel. Okay, so it sounds like a rave. Like a basement or, you know what I mean? Tunnel. Party. Might be a party. Or it's a hey, let's see if we can get her to come out to this event, and then while she's there thinking it's an innocent fun night, that's when we take her out. Nobody will know where she is, so we'll just make her disappear. Do I deal with gang stalking? Yeah, I have been. Drugs. What did I tell you? I just split the deck. I told you. Drugs, poison. I don't know. Every royal knows also, baby, that assassination attempts come from the inside or somebody who's trying to use somebody on the inside. Right? Like a third party, somebody that's on the outside entirely, or like a lesser noble that's trying to get to a higher noble through some kind of mid-range noble, or even like a servant or something. I know. No. Legal proceedings, but you are still going to prison. Perversion, you freaking perverts. I split the door. What's behind that? Curious. Yeah, it's a couple. In some cases, it's a couple. In fact, the dude who was driving by has a wife and children. And because of his choice to start doing that a few months ago, and doing it again actually today, I called CPS to let them know that there's something wrong with these people. They're on drugs, and they sell drugs, and they do drugs, and they are not stable people. They spend their time stalking single women, innocent women, and messing with children's lives. So I don't think that they should be around kids. I wouldn't let them around mine. I don't think they should be around anybody's. I just split the deck again. I don't think they should be around anybody's kids, caregiver. I mean, these are not safe people, and they were being nasty and just trying to argue, even though they were wrong, even if they knew they were wrong, out of ego, like I said. You're welcome. Show the cards! Okay. It was a karmic male. Anything else? Smacked our lips at the same time. I'm ready to blaze. Power supply. Male. This is a karmic using divine feminine, the weirdo, as a alien, as a power supply. Trying to suck the light out of the light worker. Hello, no. Oh, wow. They want me dead. No. Pie face. And co. And your nasty mommy too. When in doubt, play a love song.
We have climbing.
No doubt, but let's definitely shift the energy. That was so funny to hear them say earlier. It was so cute. I knew what they were talking about. I love my spirit team.
They all have 5 grams.
Ready? Oh, I hear that. I like that.
My own true love.
Wait, that's... No. Is that it? I'm getting a couple songs at once. Hold on. Try that again.
My own true love.
Somebody said that was a good reading. You like that? Thank you.
Farewell for
Not right now. But
I'm going away. But I'll be
Thank you. I'm a cheerleader. Well, here's what it is, as you just saw. Okay, we've had the trolls and the vampires. No, I will take that energy from those bullies, turn it around, and use it to manifest something positive. So vampires and trolls, beware. Because you will end up drained with nothing, and I will have all the energy that you tried to throw at me cleaned and then alchemized into something positive for me. A nice, fresh cup of juice to boot. In a cat cup, like that. Troll blood.
though I go 10,000 miles, 10,000 miles, my own true love, 10,000 miles.
I don't think this is the song.
The rocks may melt and the seas may burn if I should not return.
That's why I'm like, no, this not the song. What is this? It's not Sleeping at Last. No, it's not, yeah, that was 10,000 miles. No, this is I'm Going to Be. It's 500 miles is the one I was looking for. It's close. Sleeping at Last. The title was close. I heard this twice today. Hear it again. Thank you. No, you get to go. Also, even if Max was Mexican,
When I
he would
wake
get-
up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. And when I come home, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who's coming home to you.
Well, that would be fine if you were. Nachos are delicious.
Well, I know I'm gonna dream about the time when I'm with you. I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you. And when the money comes in for the work I do, I'll pass along every cent of it to you. And when I'm lonely, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who's lonely without you. And if I grow old, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who's growing old with you. But I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door. But I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles to fall down at your door.
Don't be rude in my house. Right. That's a good question, Tony. Can I tell you a
When
secret?
I wake up,
I was going to say, well, why don't we ask your mom? Why don't we ask your mom about you? But I wasn't. I was going to let it go. But you didn't. That was funny. Great minds.
well, I hope I'm gonna be the man who's waking up to you. And when I'm dreaming, well, I know I'm gonna dream about the time I had with you.
I was hearing this though. Oh, somebody's so mad. There it is. Ooh! They're like furious, raging. Nothing we're doing is working. Also, they're scared. She's going to beat the algorithm suppression. See, they know it's just a little temper. I know.
I didn't think
You thought wrong. You didn't think very well, did you? Not hard. Not with enough brain cells to actually form a cognitive thought. What was it? Smooth brain? You got smooth brain syndrome, eh? Well, just remind you that after age 25, your brain stops developing. If they're not mature after that point, they're not going to be. We eat trolls and drink their blood in cat cups.
You should have heard, but I what you say. I'm talking loud, not saying much. I'm criticized, but how your bullets ricochet. Shoot me down, but I get up. I'm bulletproof, nothing to lose. Fire away, ricochet. You take your aim. Fire away, shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. You shoot me down, I won't fall. I am
Don't reduce bumps and rallies for lunch. That's the problem.
Raise your voice, sticks and stones may break my bones.
said, shit, let her, let our queen sing. Like, stop running your mouth. Right, hello. Oh no, absolutely. Brain development and cognitive maturity are not the same things, but we have people with both problems here. We have people over 25 who are not going to develop anymore, and they think that doing things like this is appropriate. But then we also have people here, similarly in the chat, that are just mentally defunct. Usually, you know what happens when you're mentally defunct? You're not very mature either. So, just saying.
Nothing to lose.
I am away from me.
Ricochet, you took your aim.
Fire away, fire away.
Shoot it down, now
I am titanium. You shoot me down. I am titanium.
machine gun, firing at the ones who run. Stoner, bulletproof
I am titanium. You shoot me down. Now I am titanium. Shoot me down. Now I am titanium. Oh, he's off. He doesn't have a choice. I put him somewhere else. He went to internet jail. Let's do... Heard.
I didn't even think I
didn't think at all. Angry little monkeys. Why are you so angry? Oh, I hate her. Oh, so cranky. I'm going to switch it up after this song. Do some true crime and yoga and chill out. First Furious. Although I did do yoga afterwards last time. So I'm furious. I can feel that. You can't keep me down. I am born, I'm furious. Feel the lioness, make a face, I can feel that. Feel the lioness. All right, Coffee House has a new true crime. I saw it pop up earlier. I didn't watch it though. I was busy. I thought maybe we'd save it. I would save it to share. I do have some other channels, a bunch of other ones, but I think I might save those just given the time. And then on the next one, I'll be back. This video was titled, Narcissist Mom Realizes Police Discovered She Murdered Her Entire Family. Wow. Let's go. Coffee house crime. I don't like her energy already.
So sorry.
Oh no.
I'm devastated. I love them.
Ah!
And I can't believe that this has happened, and I'm so sorry.
It's very fake.
That they have lost their lives.
Police say you're a suspect.
Okay, you know how I don't know how else to describe this other than this. I feel like people will understand it. That's what I just heard and saw. It just gave me the chills, like something was so off in her energy. As I'm reaching for my throat chakra, actually. And it was her voice. It wasn't her voice. It was her spirit I was hearing through her voice. I could also see something in her face, her eyes. But what I was hearing in her voice was this almost like robotic, like an empty spirit. And the comparison that I got was Uncanny Valley. If you've ever heard like an AI voice to the point where you're like, oh, that's weird. It's like almost human, but it's not. And you can tell, but it's like technology. I'm talking about real AI technology on that note. But the terminology of Uncanny Valley is representing a feeling that people get. Or like when you see an AI video and it looks almost real, but then you can, like, the face will glitch a little bit, or there's just something about it that's off, like the facial expressions or the movements will just be not quite natural or be a little bit too rigid, robotic. Something's off with it. You can tell it's not quite human. And you're just like, oh, there's a reason for that also in the brain. The brain is looking for a real human connection, and it's noticing that there is a disconnect there, typically speaking. And it's giving you a funny sensation to let you know about that. It's like the crossover between emotions, but that's what Uncanny Valley means. It's like that spooky kind of like weird, ew, something's off about that feeling when you notice AI. But that is what I just picked up on a spiritual basis. That context from the AI and the Uncanny Valley term is what I just felt and like picked up spiritually on a very similar note within her. I could hear it in her voice. It's one of the gifts I have, but that was interesting to be able to explain it to you that way. Thank you, that was cool.
Fix? Do you have anything to say about
Yes,
that?
I say I didn't do anything. I love them.
Hi there folks, my name is Adrian, and today's case is one of those stories that's almost mundane
Yeah, I was holding my breath, something's off.
to begin with. Think of a family meal around the kitchen table, and the sort of thing that usually ends with awkward small talk and tea before eventually settling down for TV. And that is how this story should have ended. But instead, it became an internationally recognized murder investigation. Now, I'm pretty sure that some of you will have even heard of this story before, because the person at the center of all of this was a seemingly ordinary, albeit dull woman named Erin Patterson. And Erin, well, she invited her former in-laws over for lunch. But the thing is, lunch wouldn't quite turn out to be lunch. Let's just say for now that menu came with a few unoptional extras. But before we begin, and just to let you know that I post true crime, strange and dark stories here weekly. So if that is your sort of thing, please do consider subscribing. I really appreciate it. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Erin Patterson.
Too late for coffee. But you know what I will do?
Welcome to Melbourne, folks. Now, Melbourne needs no formal
Sleep
introduction,
dummy.
and I'm sure that you'll probably agree that I can be annoyingly enthusiastic about this place. I mean, it's my home for a reason, and everything you're seeing here is just a glimpse into what my life is like away from the coffee house. Now, look, I'm not going to say that Melbourne is perfect. However, for someone who loves coffee, warm weather, culture, and good food, well, I believe this is the closest you can get. You've got the F1, the Australian Open, the Great Ocean Road, and seriously, more coffee shops than you can ever imagine visiting. I think we all have a place that we would eventually like to call home, and this is it for me. Now, another thing that Melbourne does very well is good healthcare. Not only has it scored 100 out of 100 for healthcare in major livability indexes, but Australia consistently ranks in the top 3 countries for healthcare internationally. And we all know how important health is, right? I mean, the quality of our lives can basically descend to nothing without it. I feel like it's something that we all start to take more seriously as we get older, and often wish that we would have got on top of it earlier. But part of that journey comes from finding the right doctor
Yes,
for
it's
us,
cat
and
food.
one
It
who
must be
fits
cat
our
food. It's
schedules, our
delicious.
personalities, and our needs. And I'm not gonna lie, that can be quite difficult to find. And that's why I love this video's sponsor, ZocDoc, because ZocDoc is a free website that helps you find and book high quality and network doctors so you can find one that you love and one that fits you. ZocDoc basically fixes all of your typical troubles, like long wait times and distant appointments. It lets you book and network appointments with over 150,000 providers across all 50 states. So, whether you need a dermatologist, dentist, primary care doctor, eye specialist, or one of the 200 plus other specialties on the platform, well, you can just search by specialty or even symptom and build a care team that actually fits you. Prefer seeing someone in person? Easy, no problem. Or maybe you want to do a video visit from the comfort of your very own home. That's fine too.
The Wi-Fi spotty under the bridges they guard. Catwoman.
And one of my favorite parts is that you can read thousands of verified patient reviews beforehand, so you're not going in blind. You can get a real sense of who your doctor is. Maybe they're chatty, or maybe they get straight to the point. Who knows? But at least you know what you're walking into. And when you're ready, you can see their real-time availability and just click to book.
I don't know about this. Try to give people their minute. Often. Not always on these, but thanks for the time, coffee house. And at least he's getting paid. I don't know. You have to be careful with some of those sponsorship programs and things like that. Not all of them are good. And that's why they're paying people to push their ads. Not always, in some cases. I don't know about that brand though. So, especially when it comes to medical care, I've seen other companies similar to that get really kind of spotty reviews, especially when it has to do with people's mental health.
And meanwhile, Heather and Ian Wilkinson had arrived at Leongatha Hospital 50 miles further. Now, at first glance, this looked like a brutal case of food poisoning. The kind that will ruin your weekend and make you swear that you will never eat that dish again. From the outside, it looked like that they were suffering from severe nausea, gnarly vomiting, and intense abdominal pain. However, when their symptoms didn't ease up and instead escalated to rather frightening levels.
Oh, remember I did that reading earlier where the homicide card came out. And I said something about they wanted to try to target the alien. Ooh, spooky bitch. They wanted to try to target the light worker, but this is Martian mints. They wanted to target the alien.
Doctors knew that they had something unusual on their hands. And when they realized that multiple people were deteriorating all at the same pace and time, well, it was at that point that they started asking much harder questions. In the midst of their collapse, doctors scrambled to try to understand what on earth happened for them to feel so severely ill. And that is when they realized something. And it turns out that that lunch came as quite the surprise to a couple of them. Because in the weeks leading up to that event, the relationship between Erin and the rest of her former husband's family had become quite strained and awkward at best. With the breakdown of their marriage and Erin being Erin, trust me, you'll know what I mean in a few moments, the vibe between them was no longer relaxed like it once used to be. And now, between the 5 of them that had attended that lunch, 4 of them were severely ill in hospital, and only 1 had no symptoms whatsoever. That being the chef. Now, it is worth highlighting here that on the same day as the lunch, Erin had also checked in at the hospital after reporting similar but milder symptoms. However, by evening, she had discharged herself and gone home. But isn't that strange, though? Because while everybody else was getting worse, Erin felt not only good enough, but confident enough to return home. As the hours passed by, doctors realized that this was no longer behaving like food poisoning at all. Their patients were declining way too rapidly and severely. It was when those lab reports came back conclusive for alpha-aminitin, beta-aminitin.
Didn't I just tell you about the, well, let me try to see if I can find a way to poison. That was in the reading I just did. This is what they wanted to do to me. Also, this is a similar chat that I actually had with some of the authorities. And we had a chat about some of the psychology behind this and how when you leave a narcissist or an abusive dynamic or group or whatever, especially if it's gang stalking and things like that, even with narcissists, usually that's the most dangerous time. You'd think that being there and dealing with the abuse is the most dangerous, and it is, but the reason that leaving becomes even more dangerous, or can, is because they feel like as long as the person's there to be bullied and battered around, ups and downs and what have you, they feel like they're in control of even just like the victim's emotions, and also as a result, their movements, they're staying, right? If they're staying. But when a victim leaves, or the other thing is this is called the trap of the collapsed narcissist or the collapsing narcissist. They have a few main big fears, these narcs. 2 of their biggest fears tend to be being exposed and not having control over a narrative. Or control in general. Control over people, a situation, a dynamic, a narrative. But the narrative is important for them. This is why they slander and they gossip and they even will file fraud and things like that to push their agenda. Because if they can lie to people or manipulate a situation and make people think a certain way, then they can try to control social dynamics and how people treat a victim. They can manipulate how people move, whether they support and protect a victim or whether they enable and help an abuser. And then as a result, if people are intervening on the abuse or not enabling it, then they lose access or they lose control over that victim. So they fear that. And whether it's just slander, sometimes that is a tactic, or, I mean, they're it's not an uncommon thing. Hi, kitty. For a crazy ex to try to take out an ex-partner. Like, let's say you're dealing with a narcissist and you leave them. They feel like they can't handle the feeling of rejection and failure, or they don't want to explain to people why the relationship or the marriage dissolved, right? So, instead, they think in their delusional head that their best course of action and their solution is to take out the victim. Like either that by erasing the victim from existence, I don't know, it's delusional. It doesn't fix everything. But in their head, that's what it boils down to for them. They don't know what else to do. It's a desperation tactic. If I can't control you, if I can't keep you, if I can't have you, nobody else can. If I can't control you, I'm going to destroy you. It's an inadequacy thing as well. And then that destruction makes them feel somewhat powerful. And I'm picking up even the bit where some of these people convince themselves that they just had no other option. Like, it's straight up delusion.
And phallotoxins, that specialist doctors realized what they were likely dealing with, and that was a tiny fungus called death cap mushrooms, one of the most lethal natural poisons known to medicine. And suddenly, that quiet family lunch did not look like a simple case of bad cooking anymore. After realizing this, the detectives went all the way back to the start, right to the lunch itself. They looked at what they had eaten, who was exposed to it, if there were any leftovers, and, of course, if there could possibly be a motive. And that is when they realized that Perrin had invited her former in-laws, Don and Gail, along with Gail's sister, Heather, and Heather's husband, Ian, and even her former husband over to her home in Leongatha. Now, Simon Patterson, who, of course, is Erin's estranged husband, who was also invited, had chosen not to attend at the last minute. At the time, it likely felt like it was just one of those slightly awkward post-separation dynamics. You know the type. You go, I'll skip it, we'll avoid the tension. Now, on paper, it sounded perfectly normal. Families fall out, reconcile, stay connected, and sometimes they still will meet for lunch even after relationships get messy. That in itself is not unusual. So, let's talk about the lunch. The meal served that day was Erin's famous beef Wellington, accompanied by mashed potatoes and green beans. Which isn't an elaborate dish, to be honest with you, but also, it's not exactly a quick throw something in the oven type situation either. I would say that
Terrible. She's a terrible person. I do remember this case. I'm going to give you the ending now. It's mushrooms. She made beef Wellington. I think she was part of like a foraging group, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but she knew what poison mushrooms were. She knew how to find poison mushrooms, or she knew how to discern them while foraging. Oh, those ones are poisonous, so don't use those ones, right? Except for, in this case, with the knowledge about poisonous mushrooms that she had, she said, oh, those ones are poisonous. I'm going to take those and go cook a big meal for the ex-in-laws and whatnot and get rid of them. So she cooked beef Wellington, which is a very can be a very difficult to execute British dish. Old school, very old, classic. Like mushrooms are in the sauce.
Beef Wellington is the kind of meal that you cook when you would like to impress people, or apparently when you would like to star in one of the most infamous poisoning cases in modern Australian history. Anyway, the afternoon went ahead smoothly. Everyone sat down, ate together, chatted, and then eventually left to get on with their Sunday. There were no immediate collapses, no dramatic reactions, and no one pushing their plate away in disgust. By all means...
What book is this? This is Coffee House Crime. This is narcissist mom realizes police discovered she murdered her entire family. Or we're just talking about poison. No!
It was just an ordinary Sunday lunch. However, within hours, and as we all know by now, all of that normality suddenly began to unravel, and one by one, all of her guests became violently ill. and it all pointed back towards Erin. Speaking about Erin, I have to say that she is one of the most interesting yet boring characters that I've ever covered here. Now, I'll get into more details later in this video, but if I had to describe her as a meal, well, she would not be a beef Wellington. I think soggy white bread is more fitting for her, with a thin slice of unsalted butter.
American
Seriously,
cheese.
if blandness were a competitive sport, then she would
Plastic
absolutely win gold. Okay, in more fairness to her, on the surface, she did not present as the
And
sort
baloney.
of person that you'd expect to find at the center of a story about mass poisoning. She was just a mother living in regional Victoria who was leading what looked like a relatively ordinary suburban life. There was no dramatic criminal history and no long trail of violent behavior either. She was just someone who, to neighbors and acquaintances, appeared to be very unremarkable. Now, although Erin had been married to Simon Patterson, who, of course, was the son of Don and Gail Patterson, their relationship had sadly broken down in the years prior. However, despite their separation, she still remained in contact with Simon's parents, and on the face of it, that dynamic seemed perfectly fine. They were still the grandparents to her daughter, of course, and as for Erin, she had tragically lost her own mother only a few years prior. Don't get me wrong, it certainly was strained at times, but not outwardly hostile. And that's partly what made her random lunch invitation seem so normal to the rest of the family. She was just a separated mother who was inviting her former in-laws over to talk, reconnect, and maybe smooth things over. Friends and family describe Erin as someone who was, at times, particular, controlled, and keenly aware of how she presented herself. She wasn't eccentric or dramatic, she was just deliberate. The kind of person who seemed composed on the surface, even when the situation around her was anything but. So, going back to lunch yet again, doctors were alarmed to see that not only had the toxicology reports come back with positive traces of alpha-aminitin and extremely high ALT levels in their livers, but their symptoms almost perfectly aligned with poisoning from, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, Amanita phalloides. Now, of course, that is more commonly known as the death cap mushroom, a species that is so toxic that even eating a small amount can quite literally destroy your liver beyond repair. They are quite interesting, to be honest with you, and they're actually something that I was never aware about before this story. They don't grow in dark, forbidden forests or hard-to-reach caves either. They just grow quietly in ordinary places like under oak trees in suburban parks, along footpaths, and even in gardens. Originating from Europe, they have found a comfortable home in parts of Australia.
I just heard, don't eat anything anybody gives to you. It's not for other people right now. It's for me. But yeah, no. Thank you.
They don't look sinister at all. In fact, from what I've
heard that somebody says, are you going to pick those up? Not yet. There's a message in there. I went to put it away, and then they knocked it out of my hand and said, no, there's something in there for you. Oh yeah, what was that other one too? Remind me. Thank you. Turkey tail block. Parrot wax cap isolation. Okay, so the copycats are trying to isolate. I told you. Bleeding tooth stagnation, spirit medicine, but we're going to push through it, so it doesn't matter whether it's like algorithm suppression tactics or anything else. Vampires, hello, told you.
They don't even taste bad. They just sit there waiting to be eaten, and of course, that is what makes them so dangerous.
Stay calm, lion's mane.
As the hours turned into days, time served no kindness to any of them, and tragically, Don and Gail would pass away next to each other, and Heather would...
And to be perfectly honest, how nice has it been to have so many less of them here?
Follow shortly afterwards due to severe organ failure, and although her husband Ian would thankfully survive, he had a very long road ahead of him in intensive care. And so, over the space of only a couple of days, one single meal had effectively wiped out multiple...
Reveal, yin. It's just, the truth is the truth. Whatever It is. I just flow.
Members of the same family. And strangely, the chef was totally fine. It is no surprise to see then that eventually detectives turned their heads towards Erin and the way that she handled
Expanded awareness and celebrate.
the interview, and the news was, well, I'll just let you see for yourself.
It's a tragedy what's happened.
Can you tell us about the meal that you cooked?
I'm so devastated by what's happened, by the loss of Don. Don is still in hospital. The loss of Ian and Heather and Gail, who were some of the best people that I've ever met. Gail was like... Gail was the mum that I didn't have because my mum passed away 4 years ago.
Wow.
And Gail's never been anything but good and kind to me. And Ian and Heather were some of the best people I've ever met. They never did anything wrong to me. And I'm so devastated about what's happened. I'm devastated. I love them. And I can't believe that this has happened, and I'm so sorry that they have lost their lives.
Do they teach from the property area?
I just asked you to leave me alone, please.
Police say you're a suspect. Do you have anything to say about
Yes,
that?
I say I didn't do anything. I love them. And I'm devastated that they're gone. And I hope that every fibre of my being that Don pulls through. That's
Where
what I
did the
have to
mushrooms
say.
come from? Were they picked by you, or where did they come from, Erin? Can you tell us?
Okay. The star. Right, they were trying to knock the star off her perch. No. Right. Trying to throw shade. The light worker, like I said earlier. 9 of Pentacles. Here, no reversals. Okay. Why? Because they see that Divine Feminine has been building, and she's almost right there to a threshold point that they can't go to, or light workers in general, but yeah. 2 of Swords. I feel like this might be a personal, though. They wanted to create blockages and confusion. 4 of Swords to prevent movement forward. Keep people juggling with too much on their plate, right? To keep people from seeing the truth, illumination. 10 of Pentacles, from coming into union, happy home, family, love. The Fool, having fresh starts, new beginnings. Without them, like I said, there's a gateway, a threshold that they cannot come through. 9 of Wands, wounded warrior, trying to put burdens on people. This could be PTSD too, trying to stress people out or re-trigger wounds, or they have done so much it's caused stress to the point of us needing to walk away. But this is victory, right? We took the swords they tried to stab in our back and decided to move on our path with the weapons they threw at us. Like I said, I'll just alchemize that shit. But it backfires on them. Like I said in the last live, those death spells, especially during this Mercury retrograde, it's like a Saturn return, this retrograde. Meaning karma. Saturn returns about getting karma back. So, 2 of Wands. 2 of Swords. Knight of Swords. They wanted people to not know which direction to go in. Oh, I think that was the other card. What was that then? 7 of Swords. Oh, so they were trying to be sneaky. That's a sneaky card. They were trying to be sneaky. They got caught being sneaky. But we still took their sneaky swords away from them. They walked away crying and defeated. In the end, you don't charge at an Empress like that. Four of Cups. Now they're feeling stuck in their heads. That's where they wanted us. Ace of Pentacles. How the divine still blessed us with that last pentacle. Remember, we were at Nine of Cups, Nine of Pens. Yeah, look, there we go. 10 of Cups. 10 of Cups and 10 of Pentacles. Happy home life, stability, abundance, success, growth, achievement, Ace of Wands with a fiery momentum of divine support behind. Page of Swords. Like two things. Fresh starts, yes, but also these people were very immature. Trying to cause heartbreak to somebody seasoned in grief. Now they've caused their own heartbreak. Consequences of their actions are really upsetting them. Six of Pentacles. Begging for what? Scraps, mercy, forgiveness. They will be. Yes, and then swords up in their head, stuck in their head, scared. 10 of Wands, burdens strapped to their back, not just in their head, worried like they wanted other people, judgment, because they're in spiritual, they feel they've gone through spiritual court and are now in spiritual jail, right? And in some cases now it's manifesting physically. They have got to go through Four of Wands. Physical court, and they'll lose there and go to physical jail. But happy home life, stability comes from that for my light workers. And Nine of Cups. Like I said, having just about everything in balance, and that's why they were trying to cause dysregulation. Page of Wands. Right. Causing people upset to the point of having to keep starting over on projects or sabotage as well. King of Wands. Very reckless and impulsive and dominating. Or more specifically, I feel like it's both. They tried to come at somebody in their full power. Right? This is somebody who wanted to gain a perception of superiority by bullying people or something, but they came after somebody in their true sovereignty. The Emperor, there it is. Reckless. Right, like I said, the King of Wands, it's like reckless fire sign. Tried to come and be in charge and be a big bully, but tried to come at an Emperor who's been through the ringer. And the Emperor also embodies the King of Wands. But the Emperor embodies Emperor's Aries. Hello. That would be me. Aries moon. See, that's hidden. They come for me thinking I'm one way because they see aspects of the Mercurial, Gemini, or Virgo, but they misjudge the Aries, the fire sign. Whoops, not my whoops. The moon sign. They don't realize it's there. It's moon sign. It's not always out. It's hidden. Unless you know. Meaning they didn't realize that I would defend myself, my family, my support network, my territory, etc. They didn't realize that Scorpion, it was a little scorpion. Oh, so family focused or oriented or sovereign and upright. They misjudge. Because the Emperor embodies all of the kings. King of Wands, Cups, Swords, and Pence. But also the High Priest, you see. And with the High Priest comes the Hermit, naturally, as well. So the Emperor outranks the King. Page of Cups. Yeah, see, they were novice. Silly, silly. Emotional, too. Reckless. Emotionally driven, wanting to be a bully and dominate. Fire-driven, passionately. Giving reckless Sagittarius, honestly. Toxic Taurus, even. Four of Pentacles. Trying to cause people the need to keep building or rebuilding. Five of Pentacles. Wanting to leave people out in the cold or put people out in the cold, cause them losses. Seven of Wands, right? Because they were mad. Look, we both have wands. We're all the same. No, we're not. I use mine to build and manifest. You use yours to try to fight people. I might use mine to protect myself from you trying to knock me off my sovereign throne. But, well, you're using yours to try to beat people off of their thrones instead of trying to build your own. Go mind your business. P's and Q's. High Priestess, right. Well, there's the same thing. See, the Empress. Hello. High Priestess Empress here. Hi, Empress. Speaking of, and let's pack a peace pipe. Similarly speaking, embodies all of the queens in the deck. Queen of Cups, Queen of Swords, Queen of Wands, Queen of Pentacles. But also, baby, the High Priestess in this regard. Which, by default, comes with the Hermit. It's a phase, a hermitude phase, a transitional phase to get to the High Priest or the High Priestess state. So, they come in hand in hand, they come in tandem, and then I also, Hermit card being Virgo, Emperor card being Aries. Both of which are in my trine. Gemini, Virgo, Aries. Whoops! You misjudged your target and should have minded your business and kept your eyes on your own homework. In this life school. So now I will drink jugs of troll blood and keep moving on with my life. Cheers. 1, 2, 3. Oh, these cards? These are the ones that you saw the angels throw out of my hands. You see, I went to grab a different deck, and that one fell out of the shelf. I put it back, and it fell out again. And I had it in my hand, ready to put it back in the shelf, and it flew out of my hand. So I picked the cards that were facing upright because I realized they were asking me to read. And who am I to deny a message from the divine? I listen. Cheers. I love you. Thank you. That's lovely. Ooh, the High Priestess. 5 of Wands. See? You use yours to try to fight people. I use mine to manifest. That's why I'm on my pedestal and throne. You mind your business. Could have built your own, but you spend your time trying to knock people off of their own. At that, look at this. You remember in the other... Okay. You had... Let's go back. It doesn't matter. You had there was a King of Wands card, so like reckless, somebody trying to be dominating. It wasn't a nice energy. It wasn't an upright, good energy. and trying to compete with an emperor. But the emperor outranks the King of Wands because the emperor also embodies all of the attributes and the traits that the King of Wands has. But the emperor also embodies more other traits that the King of Wands has not mastered. So the emperor is superior. Because the emperor can do everything the King of Wands can do, but the King of Wands cannot do everything the emperor does. The emperor knows everything the King of Wands knows, but the King of Wands does not know everything the emperor knows. And subsequently, the emperor has experienced everything the King of Wands claims to have experienced, but the King of Wands has not experienced everything the emperor has experienced. You see. Which is why, on the other card, unlike the King of Wands, sitting on his throne, just sat on a seat and decided to claim superiority on that note, because that's all that card was outlining. Trying to compete with the emperor. Well, I've got a throne. Yeah, but the emperor's in a wheelchair. So you're in a wheelchair. I'm going to compete with somebody who's injured or who's disabled or like whatever the case may be, right? But what that actually is they're trying to compete with somebody who has more wisdom. They're trying to compete with somebody who has more experience. They're only in that wheelchair because of everything they've been through. Everything that they've mastered that the King of Wands has not. So they're recklessly, at that, trying to fight somebody in a wheelchair. So how big and tall and strong and tough are you, really? Spiritually speaking or otherwise? Not very. I already hear it. Karmic's like, well, if you got injured to the point of A, B, and C, then, like, what? How strong are you? God must not love you, etc., etc. Oh, no, baby. It was written a long time ago, first of all. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I shall repay. 1. 2. They shall fight against you. They shall not prevail against you. For I am here to save you and deliver you. I also just heard something about helpmate. Helpmate. You know what I also heard? Again this morning. What God stitched together may no man, may no force tear apart. So it's like calling helpmates. Ah, look. Ace of Cups. There it is. 6 of Wands. 10. There it is. Yep. Okay. I also just heard, touch not mine anointed, do my prophets no harm. So they're in trouble for that. Ace of Cups. You've got divine love, blessing of love here. Also abundance and also even just peace. Emotional balance. We'll get to that in a second, but this is a victory card. So after a long battle and cycle of heaviness. 11:11 on the clock on the East Coast. Kiss the clock. Make a wish. Thank you, God. Temperance. Balance. 11:11 is a manifestation portal. So focus on you'll be hearing from my lawyers. Oh, absolutely. I didn't say it, but sometimes God sends me as karma. So there's balance happening here. First of all, this is divine alchemy. The cups there. But after a long, difficult battle, there's regulation and balance and peace being reestablished. That's spilling over onto the physical, into the whole world. After the devil tried to create entrapments.
Hello? What meal did you cook then? Did you eat the same meal, Eric?
Can anyone say crocodile tears? And so, with 3 deaths and one very
said it was
suspicious-looking
very
chef, detectives now have the complex task of proving if Erin was guilty or just plain stupid. But where do we even begin with a story like this? Because by now they were pretty sure that it was death cap mushrooms. But how do you prove if this was an accident or if it was something far more nefarious? And of course, the problem is that these mushrooms are naturally sourced, meaning there is no bank statement, receipts, or surveillance footage to prove there was a crime. So, what are they supposed to do? Well, as it turns out, Erin would actually make so many of her own mistakes that she would basically prove it for them. As they began their early investigations, detectives found that the meal may have contained a mixture of both store-bought mushrooms and others that were foraged. And that was a very crucial piece of information, because that distinction would end up mattering a lot. If toxic mushrooms had accidentally been gathered and then mixed into the meal, this case could actually point towards a catastrophic mistake. However, if they had instead been knowingly sourced, dried, or stored beforehand, well, that's when things start to feel less like a kitchen accident and more like a deliberate menu choice. So, with this now being an active case that did involve numerous deaths, not necessarily homicide, but indeed deaths, police decided that it was finally time to interview Erin on the lunch. And I'm not sure what you're going to think about this one, but to me, she looks incredibly displeased to be there. And also, why is she blinking so often?
Following eating at your house, Donald, Ian, Gail and Heather all become so ill that they ultimately ended up in the intensive care unit at both the DNL hospital and then moved to the Austin hospital. Right. Following that, they had a deterioration in their condition and that they become so ill that their livers have failed. Right. Heather and Gail passed away.
There's a karmic who's panicking and sweating and like crying and it's like apologizing. I'm so sorry. I'm never going to do A, B, and C again. It's because they're getting karma and they know it. They know why and they know where it's coming from. If they were trying to cause stress or trauma in other people, it's coming back to them. They know this. It's not funny now. I get it. I get where you were coming from. I get what you were talking about. It's not funny. Please just take it away. They think that I'm please stop sending your angels after me. Please stop. Please. Like that's the energy. It's crazy. They know that they've incurred the wrath of legions of holy angels and divine protectors on their behinds. Right? They try to call legions of demons on us. It's only fair. In reverse, right? It's the threefold law. You should have known that before trying to play with spell work and crap. Come on now.
The other, conversely, we're trying to understand why you're not that ill. So you understand why we're interviewing you today?
Yeah, I do. But I'm sure you understand too that like I've never been in a situation.
Is Turbo a child? Did you look? Well, we know who sent the children. But Yeah, this is an 18+ live stream. Of course, they're being immature. They don't belong here. If you notice kids in here, let me know so I can boot them. Love you guys. Thank you.
Situation like this before, and I've been very, very helpful with the health department through the week because I wanted to help that side of things as much as possible because I do want to know what happened. So I've given them as much information as they've asked for and offered up all the food and all the information about where the food came from.
Obviously, we've got concerns in relation to the mushrooms and where they come from. Okay. Is that something you've done in the past, foraging for mushrooms or anything like that? Never. You were at home and present when we did a search warrant today. All right. I know you weren't watching everyone at all the time, but I just want to go through on tape some of the stuff we've, and like I said, we'll give you a copy of this, everything we've seized. Kitchen, far left bottom drawer, instruction manual for a sunbeam, food lab, electronic dehydrator. What's that in relation to? Do you know anything about a dehydrator in your house?
So, police began working backwards through the timeline. They started by looking through Erin's shopping records, her phone data, and her movements in and around Leongatha and nearby towns. Basically anything that could help them reconstruct her movements. And of course, that included surveillance footage. As you may have caught on in that interview, it was in the middle of their investigation of Erin's home that one of the officers found a manual for a food dehydrator, which, up until this point in time, had done absolutely nothing wrong in its life. But little did the poor old dehydrator know that it was about to become one of the most discussed appliances in Australian criminal history. So, what precisely is a food dehydrator? Well, it's kind of self-explanatory because it's in the name. At its most basic level, it's essentially used to remove moisture from food.
Who's having pizza pockets or pizza bagels? I'm tasting something like that. I saw that.
By slowly circulating warm air until ingredients become dried and preserved. People will use them for all sorts of things like fruit slices, jerky, and herbs. It's not exactly the kind of device that you'd associate with a homicide investigation. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard anyone using this in true crime before, yet here we are. So thanks, Erin. And as investigators looked closer at how the meal may have been prepared, they began to consider that maybe the mushrooms weren't used fresh at all. And when forensics analysed the kitchen, they realised that, although the dehumidifier was missing, there were several items linked to that dehumidifier that did in fact contain traces consistent with death cap mushrooms. And moving away from the crime scene for a moment, doctors were not entirely reassured by Erin's behaviour either. Now, it is true that she did in fact attend the hospital on the same day as the others were checked in, but it's also true that she left far more quickly than even medical staff were comfortable with. In fact, her early discharge would raise enough concern that doctors later questioned whether she had fully grasped the severity of what she was actually dealing with. This was one of the main things that stuck out to me, because if there was even a small chance that she had been exposed to the same toxin, then most people would beg to stay at the hospital. And so, after checking herself out from the hospital, doctors had this conversation with the police.
So, this is Dr. Chris Watson from Leongatha Hospital, and I have a concern regarding a patient that presented here earlier but has left the building and is potentially exposed to a fatal toxin from mushroom poisoning. And I've tried several times to get hold of her on her mobile phone. So, before I get all that information in, what address do you need the police to attend, Dr. Chris? Yeah, so, well, should I give the hospital address or the address of the patient? If you know where they are, their address. I have the address of the patient. Yeah, go ahead with that. Okay. What's her name? So the last name is Patterson, first name? Erin. Mushroom poisoning, you said? Yeah, so there was 5 people that ate a meal on Saturday, and 2 of them are in intensive care at Dandenong Hospital. 2 have just been transferred from Leongatha Hospital to Dandenong Hospital, and Erin presented this morning with symptoms of poisoning. she's got the work. No, there was time for the nurse to begin observations, and I was managing the other critically unwell patient, so I had a brief chat to her about where the mushrooms were obtained, and after that, while I was attending the other patients, the nurse informed me that she had discharged herself against medical advice.
And that wasn't all, it turns out, because then came the surveillance footage, and as you will see, it is probably some of the most damning evidence that Erin would have to face. While investigators were tracking Erin's movements in the days and weeks before and after their deaths, they found something interesting. It was only 4 days after that fateful lunch that a surveillance camera at a local tip would spot Erin's car pulling up. With very typical Australian countryside in the background, Erin is then seen getting out of the car and then picking up a dehydrator from the boot. She is then seen dumping it in the warehouse before then returning to her car and driving away. Now, look, outside of environmental factors, throwing away a kitchen appliance is not automatically naughty. But when you throw away a dehydrator shortly after a deadly mushroom poisoning, well, that is one way of making yourself known to the police. Oh, and just to be explicit here, the manual that they found in the house was for the exact model that she had dumped in this warehouse and then lied about not having. And that wasn't it, because only 45 minutes after the family lunch, a surveillance camera captured her disposing of cardboard at the local tip. Unfortunately, that cardboard was never actually found, so we don't know what it contained. But what it does show is someone who is potentially trying to remove evidence. Even still, as all of these details became known to the general public, the overall tone of this case changed quite dramatically. In fact, I even remember hearing about this case when it happened, and how the general opinion went from believing it was just an accident to thinking that maybe Erin did actually have something to do with it. And that's not it either, because around the same time, there were other things coming out too. For example, there was this text message, which basically confirms that Erin was sneaking mushrooms into the kids' brownies. Now, of course, those mushrooms were totally normal because those kids are absolutely fine. However, what it does show is that Erin was sneakily trying to put things unknowingly into people's food. And speaking of mobile phones, that wasn't the end of it. So, what you're currently watching right now is body cam footage of detectives taking Erin's phone away from her in the days after the murders. The detective at the table then asks for her PIN code, where she gives him one number and then another. And it turns out that both of them were actually incorrect, because this device did not have a PIN at all. Which is a slightly odd mistake to make, right? Because most of us will use our phone code dozens of times a day. In a way, it's kind of like muscle memory. So, to confidently provide 2 wrong codes for a phone that apparently didn't require one, that kind of raises an eyebrow. And that's actually because this was not her usual phone at all, but a secondary device. In other words, it was a dummy phone. How's that for innocent?
So it's 3:29 p.m. on the 5th of August 2023. Thanks for your patience today, Erin. We're completing our search. The only outstanding item is that mobile phone that you've got there. So I'll seize that now from you. Is there a PIN code on your phone?
Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
I'm picking up French toast now. It's a cool gift. But I'm not having pizza or French toast, so. And specifically, what was it? Like pizza pockets or pizza bagels I was getting? Maybe. And then just picked up French toast. I don't know why. Not here.
One count of attempted murder. Now, of course, Erin would plead not guilty because even from the get-go, she always played the victim card extraordinarily well. The prosecution believed that Erin had planned and prepared a meal with clear intent. However, Erin and her defense team would push back strongly here. They argued that the poisoning had been a total accident, and that her behavior afterwards had been interpreted incorrectly. They emphasized that she was actually a victim in this too, just as much as the others were, that she must have a good immune system, and that she was just lucky. They of course would also emphasize that her estranged husband Simon hadn't even attended the lunch. And they argued that if she really wanted revenge against him and really wanted custody over everything, then she would have made sure that he would have gone down with his family. Either way, I bet that he feels incredibly fortunate not to attend last minute. But of course, he must now deal with so much grief, loss and pain. One piece of evidence that had to be excluded from court, but one that I think is very telling, is the document that was found on Erin's phone. I'm not sure why this was disqualified, but investigators found a document titled Homicidal Poisons on her phone, and obviously it shows some clear knowledge or awareness of what was to come. Her husband would also testify that in the months and years leading up to the divorce, he had even become suspicious of Erin trying to poison him. In fact, he had become so paranoid about it that he even stopped eating her meals altogether. And Ian Wilkinson, who was the only one to survive that lunch, was also there to testify. And given the circumstances, he was very calm, composed and factual. He would also confirm that the lunch felt quite ordinary, and that no one felt awkward or uncomfortable. It is clear that everyone trusted Erin, and that Erin seemed her usual self. So, after weeks of being on trial, the jury would finally return with their verdict, and in the end, they found her guilty on all 3 counts of murder, with an additional 1 count of attempted murder. The judge described her crimes as deliberate and devastating, and carried out under the ordinary facade of a shared family meal. And I think that's the part that really sucks here, because Erin murdered her own family through an act of kindness and nurture. She was therefore sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 33 years, meaning that, with time already partially served, she could be free in the year 2056. However, by then, she will be 82 years old. As the verdict was read out, Erin just sat there with a flat, vacant expression. You would hope in moments like this she might actually be reflecting. However, it is hard to escape the feeling that nothing was going on in there. But the weird part about this story is that, even to this day, nobody quite understands why Erin wanted to murder all 4 of her guests. I mean, by now, we know that she undoubtedly did. But still, why? During her sentencing, the judge was sure to highlight how much premeditation went into this rather creative way of mass murder, and so it was clear that there was a lot of emotion and planning behind Erin's actions. However, those emotions don't actually point towards anything in particular, and so many of us are still left wondering. Of course, we do know that Erin was actually going through a divorce at the time. However, her ex-husband was not there on the day of the murders. And as far as money goes, he didn't have any sort of life insurance either. And so, the only real motive we can go with is just meaningless petty revenge. There's something unsettling about the way that this case unfolded. Like, there was no big explosive argument or any obvious warning sign. It was all just a polite invitation for lunch made by an ordinary family member that then spiraled into mass murder. In its own way, that actually makes it feel even more terrifying, because as soon as trust and deceit come into the mix, it always makes you want to second-guess everything. Now, on the positive side, most dinner hosts won't usually treat beef Wellington like a chemistry experiment gone wrong, so I do think that you're probably fine at your next Sunday roast. Of course, so long the chef's name isn't Erin. I feel bad for her victims too, because this is not only about the moment that they died, but everything that they were supposed to be forever afterwards. Their lives wouldn't only end that day, but their futures were erased too. And what makes it even more heartbreaking is that they didn't go to that lunch expecting any danger whatsoever. They merely went as family and trusting the person who invited them. You know, with so many strange and peculiar details around this case, I wouldn't be surprised if this remains as one of Melbourne's most notorious murder stories for many decades to come. In fact, in the months and years that followed, the town of Leongatha saw a tourism boom worth millions of dollars due to the case's notoriety, which is insane when you think about it. But of course, the largest impact here is not on the town itself, but on its victims and their families. And I just hope that they're okay and that they'll find peace moving forward. Anyway, folks, I think that pretty much concludes our story today. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here, because I really do.
Thanks, coffee house. Alright, it's chilling. Another layer. And hi, Gil Talk, what's up? I was getting flashes of Mr. Ballin. I know he has some stuff out that I haven't watched. So let's see what's there. I don't know how long, sometimes his videos are longer. I don't know how long this is, and I don't know how much we'll go through as a result, but I'll give you maybe like half an hour more. Or my
story format.
You cause me problems and bother me. I'll take a whole minute to report your dumb ass to YouTube. Don't even try it. Okay, this is only 30 minutes long, so perfect. It's like 33 minutes. It says he stood up to the government and became a legend.
These are about how sometimes doing what you think is the right thing can actually be the most dangerous choice you can make. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload 2, 3, even 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, the next time you're walking into a building and the like button's right behind you, obviously following you, make sure to turn around, make eye contact, and then shut the door. Don't hold it for them. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On a Saturday afternoon in February of 2011, 18-year-old Michael Peary was 1,000 feet underground, crouched inside of a dark cave in Lafayette, Georgia, along with 4 of his friends. As Michael looked around, his headlamp beam bounced off all the low-hanging rocks and underground waterfalls and deep crevices, and it all just kind of felt like some kind of dark and otherworldly planet down here. So this cave that they were in was a famous cave called Ellison, and Michael and his friends had driven over 400 miles from their college town in Gainesville to see it. Ellison was almost 12 miles of tunnels and shafts and crevices, and thousands of cavers went through it every year. It was very popular. Now, to be clear, caving as an activity was not really Michael's thing. He was a marketing major at the University of Florida, and he mostly considered himself to be a pretty quiet person and liked studying or playing in his school band or volunteering with his church youth group. And so crawling through a tiny, pitch black, very claustrophobic hole hundreds of feet underground was not really his first choice for fun. But Michael was not there today for fun. He was there because his close friend, a guy named Grant Lockenbach, had suggested it. So he had said, okay, I'll go with you. Just now, Michael looked over to where Grant was sitting with his girlfriend, whose name was Carrie, and also they were sitting with two of their other friends. And the group of them were all looking through a backpack and sort of taking stock of the various pieces of gear that they had brought along with them. Now, they'd only entered Ellison just a few minutes ago, but already the group had stopped because there was something in this area that Grant really wanted to see. And when Grant wanted to do something, it usually happened. Hence why Michael capitulated and wound up in this cave, because Grant wanted him to. And so, you know, like normal, he went along with it. So Grant, he was the president of their school's Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which Michael, Carrie, and the other two friends were also members of. And when Michael had joined the fellowship, Grant had sort of taken him under his wing and told Michael that he had tons of potential. In fact, he said Michael had enough potential to be the next president of the fellowship. And this had given Michael a ton of confidence, because he really looked up to Grant. I mean, a lot of people did. Grant was just cool. He was a few years older than Michael and was basically like a 6-foot-tall ball of positive energy who was always looking for some adventure to go off and do. Grant had been exploring caves as a hobby for the last 3 years, and he was actually really the only member of their group with any real caving experience. And it was actually this lack of experience amongst the other people that were with Grant, you know, including Michael, that was the reason they were going through an easier tunnel within Ellison that was basically a straight shot through the mountain and did not require much gear like rope or climbing equipment. It was like very beginner. But despite that, despite the low level of difficulty of the caving route they had chosen, they brought that stuff anyway, all that extra equipment, because along this easier route at the place where they were now stopped was the entrance to a vertical shaft that Grant specifically wanted to climb down, even if he went alone.
It's so easy to become a podcaster with Riverside. First, go to Riverside and open an account. When you're ready to record, just hit rec for the
Shaft was 125 feet deep. So think of like a 10-story building. That is how deep this pit went. But it was actually called the warm-up pit because compared to the other, deep pits in Ellison, it was nothing. Some were way deeper, like over 500 feet. So this was definitely not beginner. This was an advanced thing to be doing, so Grant was going to do it. But again, it's sort of a novice level, more advanced thing to be doing in this cave. Now, Michael watched Grant take the backpack with all the equipment in it over to this pit's entrance, which was basically just a very large hole in the ground that was over near this waterfall, and it was only about a few feet away from Michael. And so Michael walked over to Grant to help set him up, which involved attaching a climbing rope to the rocks that Grant could then use to lower himself into this pit with. This process is called rigging, and it took them a while since really Michael had to wait for Grant to instruct him on every step, because Michael, again, is not an experienced caver at all. But as Michael worked with Grant to get him all rigged up, he found himself peering into the pitch black hole, and as he looked down into what just felt like this bottomless abyss, he felt his stomach kind of flip. He was glad he had not promised Grant that he would go into the pit too, because, seeing it now up close in person, this was terrifying. He did not want to go into this thing, but Grant clearly did. He was excited. And so Michael and Grant continued to get Grant all set up, and then eventually, finally, when Grant was rigged, Michael heard the sound of something pretty heavy sliding off of a rock, and then moments later there was this loud, echoing thud from deep inside of this hole, the warm-up pit. For a moment, Michael was just confused. He didn't know what the sound was. Maybe it was a rock falling into the pit, but he looked over at Grant, and Grant had a very unhappy expression, and he was looking at the ground right next to the pit hole, and that was where their backpack had been, with all the equipment inside of it, at least the equipment that they weren't using, and the backpack was not there anymore. The backpack had just fallen 125 feet down into this pit. Now, obviously, this was not good. They did not want their backpack in this hole, but it was actually worse than just losing their equipment potentially, because in that bag was their only cell phone that they had brought with them. And it was also where they had put all their ropes and other climbing gear. They'd taken some stuff out, to get Grant rigged up here, but still, Losing this bag felt really bad. Without its contents, they could easily get stranded or trapped inside of this cave, and they wouldn't be able to call or text anybody. They'd be stuck. And so Michael could actually feel himself starting to panic, but then Grant cut in and played it cool as always, and he said, look, it's no big deal. He would just go down there and he would get it. I mean, he was going into the hole anyway, and he was rigged up after all, so he would just go down and retrieve the bag. It would be fine. And then before Michael or, Grant's girlfriend or the other friends could say anything, Grant just, strapped on his harness and a pair of ascenders, which were climbing tools that would help him move down the rope in a controlled way, and he began sort of positioning himself to go down into this pit. And Michael just watched Grant in complete awe. I mean, Grant was so confident that he was able to basically make everybody else around him feel calm too. I mean, Michael felt himself calming down just watching Grant. And this was not the only time that Grant had projected calm in the face of danger. During Grant's freshman year, he'd casually climbed up the exterior of one of their school's dormitories just to see if he could do it. And he did do it. And he also had joined the school's ROTC, which is a military reserve training program, and learned how to jump out of planes. So he had skydived, sort of a thrill-seeking activity. And so this moment in the cave seemed like yet another example of why Grant was really such an incredible leader. And Michael found himself hoping that by the time he potentially took over as president of the fellowship, that he could be just...
I don't live in Canada. Canada's close. I live in the United States. I do live on an island, though. For now.
The waterfall. So he and Carrie and the others just sort of talked amongst themselves and waited for Grant to call back up that he was down there and had successfully grabbed the backpack. And finally, they did hear Grant, and he did call out from somewhere down in the hole. But Michael couldn't really understand what Grant was saying because the waterfall that was kind of blasting nearby was really loud, and also Grant's voice echoed around the cave, which made it hard to tell what he was saying. So at this point, Michael and Carrie and the others were not worried. They figured that this was just an acoustics problem, not a safety problem. So Michael just walked over to the edge of this pit and kind of leaned over and just looked down. But, he couldn't see Grant. He was too far down and it was too dark. And so Michael called out, asking Grant to repeat himself because they couldn't understand what he was saying. And Grant did yell back. He clearly replied to Michael, but Michael still couldn't really make out what he was saying. However, this time, there was something really different about the way Grant sounded. Again, even though he doesn't know what Grant's saying, one thing was definitely clear. Grant no longer sounded like the calm, cool, and collected, fearless leader that he normally was. He was talking really fast, he was repeating himself, he was saying something really, really quickly, very urgently. And even though, again, it wasn't clear what it was, the tone was very clear. Grant was scared. There was a problem.
Whoa. What's that? I just built a budgeting app and base...
Now, obviously, problems arise when you are rappelling into a 125-foot hole underground in this cave. That, problems can happen. But for Michael and the others, when they sort of realized that something was wrong for Grant, it was really shocking. I mean, Grant is the guy that got other people out of problems. He was the calm guy. Nothing rattled him. And so just to hear him basically panicking, it was really unsettling for those at the surface. And so Michael and the others, they're kind of hit with this sudden realization that, one, it's very unsettling to hear Grant sounding this way, but worse, two, is they're not cavers. They can't go into this pit and save Grant if he needs saving. Not only because they lacked experience, but also all the caving, all the climbing equipment was in that backpack that fell into the pit that's down there with Grant. So there's no way they can realistically help him if he is in any sort of trouble down there. And also, their one cell phone is down in that backpack in the pit. And so unless Grant can figure out whatever problem he's got and get back up here on his own, Michael and the others, without even saying it, knew, like they were kind of helpless. And so as this realization is setting in for Michael and the others, Grant goes from trying to talk to them, even though again they can't tell what he's saying, he just sounds sort of panicked to straight up screaming. He's screaming for them. Something is horribly wrong. And so Michael and Carrie, I mean, they start yelling down to Grant, trying to get him to clarify what's going on, but you have this waterfall that's causing all this noise and splashing everywhere. It's dark, and Grant clearly is so panicked that he's not even listening to them, and so it's chaos, it's madness. And so Michael and Carrie, they turn to the other two friends, and they say, look, we're going to stay here at this hole and wait for Grant. You two leave the cave, go get help. And so the other two, they rushed off to do just that, while Michael and Carrie just sat there listening to Grant getting more and more hysterical by the second, somewhere down in this hole. They still have no idea what's wrong, but clearly there is an emergency here. And so for a little while, after the friends have gone off, Michael and Carrie, even though they're not really talking to Grant because he's just kind of rambling and yelling and screaming, they can't understand him, they're just kind of shouting down into the hole that everything's going to be okay. We've sent to get help. It's going to be okay. You're going to get out of here soon. They have no idea if he can hear them or understand them. I mean, they're assuming that the acoustics are bad down there too. Again, the sound of that waterfall is so loud. It's so dark. And so they're just like having this awful moment. But then what cut through all this chaos was at some point, Michael heard Grant say something that he really did understand. Grant, at some point, in a very high-pitched, almost screaming voice, yelled out Michael's name. Like he was directly yelling to Michael, like, I need you, Michael, to help me. Now, at this point, obviously the situation has escalated dramatically and already, like, things are bad. And for Michael, this felt like a big deal. I mean, before that, all the yelling and screaming was obviously bad.
Can I tell you something? Interestingly enough, especially for women, but not just, but especially for women, there's like one big thing that is recommended that you do if you're being attacked. Like if somebody's physically in close proximity to you and you need to defend yourself, getting their DNA underneath your fingernails can sometimes make or break a case. It's very common in true crimes. First and foremost. And in the extreme and unfortunate case of where somebody dies, get their DNA on that topic.
Bad, but Michael, he kind of views himself as Grant's successor, potentially. He's going to be the next, president of this fellowship. And he looked up to Grant so much, primarily because...
That's horrifying. You're saying, especially for women, it's recommended that if you're attacked to get the DNA so that they can try to solve the case and catch the person. Yeah, it's horrible. Especially if there's a murder. Yes, horrifying. It is horrifying. To have to... I mean, ideally, you avoid situations like that altogether. Keep yourself not even in arm's length reach to them if that happens, but that's not always the case. Often. So, yeah, in that case, if there's a need for self-defense and like you're in physical proximity and they're physically trying to attack you, scratch them, get their DNA. It's what detective advice recommends. It is horrifying to think about, because your next question was like, why can't we just teach men to love? That would possibly resolve that issue. However, on a psychological note, when you're dealing with psychopaths and sociopaths, they don't they don't have that. They don't have the brain capacity or the chemicals for that. They do not understand love. They understand in some cases infatuation and obsession, but they do not understand or feel love. It doesn't compute. On a spiritual level, that would be like asking a demon why they don't feel bad for hurting and trying to manipulate people. Zoomies. You can't make people feel things that they don't have. You can't make people, experience things, give things, emotions that they just don't have the capacity for. And what's left underneath that when you have nothing but a husk and a shell, like a demon that just jumped in a human body, right? Is a very empathy void person. Somebody who you might say, well, why can't we just teach people like that how to love? Because they're not capable of it. Yes, one love. You hear me say one love all the time. One love. One love, dude. But not everybody is that. Not everybody wants to be that. It's their free will. If they don't have it, they don't have it.
Grant was like this fearless leader, and so Michael sort of felt like when he heard his name called out, that Grant was specifically sort of challenging him, like, you, Michael, I need you. Michael took on that responsibility, and he felt like, I can't just sit here.
Tell me about the social psychopaths. Is that a particular branch or topic of psychopathy? Or socio-psychopaths, are you saying? Yeah, with a number of those disorders, you can have a combination of them, like narcissistic sociopathy. Now, every sociopath and every psychopath is narcissistic, but not every narcissist is a psychopath and a sociopath. They go in basically like tiered level stages. There's narcissist, and then sociopath, and then psychopath at the top. They typically get worse. The narcissists and the sociopaths tend to run together in more of like clique-like groups. They need other people to enable them and their bad behaviors, and then also help them like cover up and get away with their crimes. So like the mobbing and the gang stalking, the way you've seen all of that, isolation tactics, divide and conquer, etc. But the the psychopaths, they tend to run alone. Like Bundy, I think, was said to be a psychopath. And he had a wife, I believe, and kids also. But the reason that he got away with things for so long was because he was so alone. Really. He did everything by himself. He was very isolated. He didn't have any involvement. And the ones he did, obviously, like his wife, according to her, were kept entirely. She claimed to have no idea. And while it's very questionable and, I don't know, maybe I'd say uncommon, potentially, especially to that extreme of a degree, I wouldn't say it's impossible, especially when dealing with a psychopath. You would leave her out of it. They tend to run alone. Wasn't it that he was only caught because somebody found his little, what was it? Like, He was driving recklessly a bunch of times, it says, and he eventually was like pulled over too many times, I think. According to that quick search, I think there might have been more to it than that, but hey Aaron. Social psychopaths. Hold on. You got me on the psychology. This one piques my interest. Okay. So, or is it social psychopathology, you mean? Hold on. Oops. Social psych. I don't see anything about that. I see like antisocial psychopath, and they are. It's part of antisocial personality disorder, which is narcissism, sociopathy. Gotcha. Charming, manipulative, calculated, using superficial charm to blend into society while engaging in deceitful, callous, and sometimes criminal behaviors, lacking empathy, conscience, and remorse. But yeah, he was alone, other than the recklessness. I mean, like, he worked at a police, like, emergency call center or something like that. And that's also part of how he was staying ahead of them. He would get, calls and tips about certain things, and he would either intervene on them or he would hear them also and know that they were looking for certain things, so he'd cover his tracks based on what was said. The police actually interviewed him before, and then they let him go. He was the guy, but they let him go because they said, well, he doesn't have a criminal record. Which really didn't matter. It just meant that he flew under the radar for a while. Comparatively speaking, at least got away with it for a while. Yeah, they can't actually feel empathy, but they can understand the feeling of empathy. Well, they can understand the concept of it. And that's also what makes that dangerous, because those that do, that's when you get into feign empathy, it's called. It's fake. They know based on observation, or like being scolded about doing certain things or not doing certain things, reacting a certain way or not reacting a certain way, growing up, how in social, you talked about social settings, in social environments, how they should act. Like, they know after they do something nasty to somebody, they should feel sorry about it. They should say sorry or want to say sorry. They should go apologize, and that's the right social thing to do. And so they'll try to, in some cases, put on a mask, right? Fit a mold, carry a script, a pre-cut dialogue, to try to manipulate an outcome or just like fit some kind of expected agenda, societal norm. But it's not real. They don't mean it. They don't feel it. It's acting. So yeah, you're right. They know, what did you say? They can't actually feel empathy, but they can understand the feeling of empathy. Like they might be able to psychologically understand certain emotions or how other people experience certain emotions, but they don't feel, compute, their brains don't process or have those emotions. They don't even have the chemical regulation for it, depending on the disorder and the level of extremity. But yeah. As far as the empathy thing goes, what empathy is, like, if somebody here is going through something and it's making them sad, I might feel sad that they're sad. Like, it might make me just wish that they were happier in a better position, because I don't want them to be sad, or I understand what that sadness is, what it feels like, and I can understand where they're coming from. So I don't want that for them. I wouldn't want that for me. I don't want that for them. The reason that I can feel and understand, and or vice versa, someone could do that with me, those of us who can, the empaths, is because our brains are doing something called mirroring. They're called mirror neurons, MIRROR, like a mirror on a wall, mirror neurons. And so when, let's say, one of you is sad and your brain is firing off sadness, my mirror neurons pick that up and can translate that and comprehend that and even like feel that, and or remember having felt that way before and not wanting that to remain a state of being for whoever's sad, right? That's my mirror neurons picking up on your mirror neurons and then firing back and forth. But they don't have that. They either don't have the neurons, the mirror neurons, or they don't have, there's something wrong with the communication. They don't have the capacity for it. So they don't feel or understand those things. They know, like, when somebody dies, maybe they should, normal people, it's normal for people to cry or like feel sad or whatever, but they just don't. They just don't. So they might mask, they might pretend to fit into some social norm, but they don't really feel those things. It's also why it's very rigid and often robotic when it gets to that point. So things like feels off about it if you can pick it up, if you're a person who picks things up. Psychology, man.
I can't just wait. Something needs to be done, and I need to do it. I need to save Grant. And so Michael, he jumped up, and he grabbed the extra harness they still had, and he put it on. And as he was doing that, he could hear Carrie, who, she's
Not
seeing what's
tonight,
happening.
Satan.
And she's telling him, don't do it. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to go down this thing. Like, this is dangerous. Or what are you doing? Don't go. And Michael, he just looked at her and he said, I have to do this. I know Grant would do this for me. I'm doing it for him.
You benefit from CBT, you're saying? It's funny, I was just thinking a second ago before reading the comment. I'm so excited for EMDR tomorrow. It's always lovely, I always feel more regulated. It's good for my nervous system.
He needs me, I'm going down. And Michael, he's listening to Carrie, still trying to tell him not to go, but he just said to her, please pray for me. And then he walked over and he attached his harness to the same rope that Grant presumably was still attached to down at the bottom, but stuck for some reason, and into the pit he went. As soon as Michael disappeared into this hole, Carrie knelt down beside the pit, she put her hands together, and she prayed as hard as she could for Michael and Grant to be okay. And after a few minutes, she heard Michael call out from somewhere in the hole. And for some reason, she could actually understand what Michael was saying, which was basically that he and Grant were okay. He was with Grant, but they were just very, very cold. Relief flooded over Carrie, and as she exhaled all the tension she'd been holding in, and as the adrenaline kind of began to leave her body, because now she's thinking everything's okay, she also realized that she too was very cold. She just hadn't been thinking about it. She was so fixated on the safety of her boyfriend and also Michael. After all, she was only wearing a t-shirt, and the cave was very damp, and there's this waterfall kind of spraying water everywhere. It was cold. It was a damp environment. And so she's, her teeth are chattering too. She's cold. And so Carrie naturally yelled down into this hole. She can't see them, of course. She's just yelling into the darkness, what's going on? What's wrong? Is Grant okay? But Michael just shouted back to her, I'm fine, but didn't answer her question about Grant. And at this, Carrie could tell clearly there's something really wrong down there, and it probably has to do with Grant. And so she stood up, she began pacing back and forth, her stomach's in knots, and she's periodically yelling down into the hole to Michael, like, what's going on? Is Grant okay? Are you okay? But Michael, all he would say back to her is, I'm fine. He would just say that back to her, but his response time began to slow down. He wasn't responding to each and every one of her calls. He would just, yell out, I'm fine, but it began to become more and more spaced out as Carrie began to ramp up her questioning, asking more and more, what's going on? Until finally, Michael just stopped answering altogether. There were no more voices coming out of the hole. And so the minutes ticked by, and Carrie, she continued to pace around, yelling out to Michael and Grant, but the only reply she got was the sound of the water from the waterfall lapping up against the cave walls.
The online...
An hour and a half later, just before 4 p.m., a man named Anmar Mirza, along with 2 other men, ran into the Ellison Cave with climbing equipment and medical supplies. Now, there was a bigger team of rescue workers on their way up the mountain behind them that had more gear and more personnel, but that group was moving slowly because it took time to respond to a cave accident, because typically there were a lot of people and a lot of equipment, specialized equipment that was required, and also usually the victims were trapped in, pretty remote and difficult to access places, like tunnels and shafts deep inside of these caves. So Anmar and his...
Hey, guess what? Oh, 2 things. There's about maybe like 20 minutes of this video left, first and foremost. But I have a little teaser. Prerequisites. Yeah, I like it in my indica. Guess what I worked out?
Team were the initial smaller group that went ahead of the larger one to just kind of get the rescue started. A few minutes after entering the cave, Anmar saw a headlamp beam up ahead in the darkness kind of bobbing around. And as soon as he reached the origin of this light, he found a young woman who was sitting by a large hole, and she was shaking and terrified. She explained that her name was Carrie, and that her boyfriend, whose name was Grant, along with one of his friends, whose name was Michael, were down in this hole. And that Grant had gone in, there had been some issue, Michael had gone in after him, and now, when she called out for them, neither of them were responding. After hearing this, Anmar directed one of his team members to take Carrie and bring her out of the cave. And then once they had left, Anmar put on his climbing gear, and as soon as he was ready, he began to rappel down into this pit. As Anmar rappelled, he's looking straight down into this dark shaft, and at first he can't see anything. But after a little while, he began to see somewhere down below were what appeared to be 2 lights towards the bottom of this pit, which he assumed belonged to the 2 men. But before he could actually reach them, he felt something wet and freezing cold splash his cheek. Then he saw something emerge out of the darkness right below him. It would turn out when Grant rappelled down into this warm-up pit, he had made a terrible, terrible mistake. He had attached his rig to a section of rock that was directly in the path of a freezing cold waterfall. Now, this alone could have been okay. You can rappel effectively through a waterfall if you're careful. Except what happened with Grant is as he was rappelling literally through the water, like the water is coming off this waterfall, it's hitting him, he got stuck. His rope got tangled. And where he got stuck was literally in the path of the waterfall. So he's stuck in the cave, he can't go up, he can't go down, and he's just getting pounded by freezing cold water. Now, at first, what Grant likely did is kind of flail around to try to get out of the path of this water, but there was nowhere to go. He's in this shaft, there's nowhere to go, and he's just dangling there, and he began trying to scream out for help, but that was why his words were muffled, because the water was hitting him in the face, so he couldn't speak clearly. And then also, as he's just dangling there, very quickly, having that icy water hitting him nonstop would have actually sent his body into shock. And it's like he wouldn't have been able to speak or think anymore. I mean, he was becoming hypothermic. And then, in what was possibly one of his final moments of clarity, he managed to belt out Michael's name. And he said it really clearly, kind of managed to get his face out of the water for a second. And Michael, who trusted Grant completely when he heard his name being called, it felt like it was his calling. He needed to go in there and save Grant himself. And so into the hole he went, and he hooked his rope up into the same exact spot that Grant had, and down he went. And Michael, he did an incredibly brave thing by doing this. And it was something that Grant very likely would have done for him too. But again, Michael really had no idea what he was doing. He was basically just going in blind. However, unfortunately, because he just kind of followed Grant's lead and went down there without a plan, well, in the darkness, as he went down, he eventually reached where Grant was, but got stuck as well. Also, in the path of the waterfall. Granted, he was not nearly as exposed to the water as Grant was, like his face was not getting blasted by water, so he was able to call out and be heard by Carrie. But he also got tangled at the same spot, couldn't move, his body's getting hit by this icy water. And so even though the rescuers did eventually get down to Michael and Grant, by the time they did, it was too late. The two men had froze to death. They basically dangled inside of this hole, getting hit by this water for about 2 hours before their bodies just shut down. In 2013, 2 years after both Michael and Grant died inside of that cave, the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission gave Michael a posthumous medal for risking his life to save Grant's.
Oh, look, I'm getting a call from one of those unknown
Oh,
numbers.
goodness.
On a Friday night in late March of 1980, an 83-year-old man named Harry R. Truman sat on his couch in his Washington State Lodge with a whiskey and Coke and turned on his battery-operated radio to listen to the news. And just a second or two later, he found himself having to jack up the volume of the radio because he couldn't hear it anymore because a couple of his cats in the other room were fighting and yowling and it was causing a whole commotion. Harry had lost track of how many cats he actually had, but it was a lot, maybe a dozen. And even though at this moment he yelled and cursed at them and told them to knock it off, he was actually glad they were out there with him because he liked their company. 5 years earlier, Harry's wife, Edna, had died. And since then, he had lived alone, minus all these cats. And he also didn't have a lot of neighbors either. So for the most part, he had been fairly isolated the last few years. Also, Spirit Lake, the lake that his lodge was on, was 4 hours south of the major city of Seattle and pretty far into the wilderness. The lake did get busy in the summer with tourists, but at this time in March, there were only about 60 people that lived there, and they were very spread out. But Harry didn't really mind the solitude. He missed Edna a lot, but he had his cats, and he had his radio, and the jaw-dropping mountain scenery and lake, and he had his whiskey and Cokes. So overall, even though he was sort of a gruff guy, he was actually quite happy with his life. But just then, there was a loud knock on Harry's door. And Harry was not surprised by this. I mean, yes, he lives way out in the middle of nowhere, and he did not expect visitors, but in this case, he knew who it was. And as soon as he thought about that, his face contorted into a scowl. He was really annoyed. At this point in Harry's life, he really had only one problem, and it was a major problem, at least to him, and that was the government. And for the last few days, government agents, like almost certainly the ones that were knocking on his door, had been harassing him, trying to get him to leave his lodge in the wilderness that he loves so much, because they needed to conduct some kind of federal operation and they wanted everybody to clear out. Now, Harry loved his country and he'd even fought for it during the First World War, but he really did not like authority and he could not tolerate being told what to do. During Prohibition, for example, which was a period of time in the 1920s when alcohol was illegal in America, Harry had simply ignored the law and made his own booze, like he just didn't care. So, over these last few days that these federal agents had come to his house trying to get him to leave, Harry had not been intimidated, he had simply stood his ground. And he figured it was really only a matter of time before the federal government sent a local police officer over in hopes that Harry would be more cooperative with somebody that he likely already knew. But what they didn't know about Harry is that Harry really didn't cooperate with anybody. Not with the government, certainly, not with local police, not with his own family, not with his friends, or not with the two ex-wives he'd been with before finding Edna. He was just somebody who marched to the beat of his own drum. So now, Harry did not get up to answer the knock at his door. Instead, he just waited until the person out there, the visitor, yelled through the door and announced who they were, and not really to Harry's surprise, it was the local deputy that Harry did know, clearly being sent here by the federal agents to try to get Harry to leave. And when Harry still didn't answer the door when the deputy clearly had announced themselves, knowing Harry would know who they were, when Harry still didn't get up, didn't answer the door, the deputy finally, just sort of frustrated, called out, "Harry, are you sure you don't want to go?" Now, even though this deputy was being a whole lot more amicable than the government agents had been, they had been really forceful, basically telling him you gotta leave, the deputy here was at least kind of giving Harry a chance to make a decision. Despite that, the question the deputy had asked just made Harry really mad, because leaving his house was just not something he would ever consider doing. Harry had lived in this lodge for 54 years, and 37 of those years were spent running this lodge as an inn, as a business, with his late wife Edna, who was the love of his life. Now, he'd let the lodge go a little after she had died, so truthfully it was kind of falling apart and it smelled terrible, because of all the cats, but it had been theirs, and now it was his, and he would never give it up. And not only that, but just outside his doorstep was Spirit Lake, which Harry believed was the most beautiful, perfect place in the entire world. It was quiet and serene and situated right at the base of some of the most breathtaking mountains he had ever seen in his whole life. And so to say Harry loved it here was a complete understatement. His lodge and Spirit Lake were basically his whole identity. Harry didn't know if he believed in God, but he did believe in the trees and the lake and the birds that screeched at him at all hours of the day. It was like his home, this area, was his religion. And he certainly was not about to give it up just because some federal authority or government agent or whoever told him to. So all Harry said to the deputy waiting outside was a very firm "good night," which Harry was actually quite proud of himself for because he had a really hard time not swearing. So this seemed pretty mild. After that, Harry waited to see if the deputy would challenge him or say anything else, but he didn't. And moments later, Harry heard the deputy's footsteps crunching down the gravel driveway and heading back towards his cruiser. After that, Harry leaned back into his couch and smiled to himself and picked up his drink, kind of toasting himself for standing his ground, and at the same time sort of hoping that maybe now, finally, officials would understand that he was not going to change his mind. But that's not what happened. A little more than a week later, on the morning of April 5th, Harry sat in a folding chair in a clearing by his house, with his binoculars pressed to his eyes and a glass of whiskey in the cup holder of his chair. This was an area of the woods near his house he called his cocktail lounge, where he'd often go to relax with a drink. It was covered by a thick canopy of evergreens, but it also had a great view of the mountains and also the lake. But Harry was not here to relax. He was actually on very high alert because the woods were absolutely crawling with federal agents and local law enforcement officers. Harry could literally see them right now through his binoculars, walking around the various camps they had set up all over the mountainside and also near the lake. And there was nobody to stop them because everybody else who lived in this forest had bowed to the pressure and left when told to, which meant Harry was quite literally the last resident still fighting the good fight. Now, so far, officials had not physically attempted to force him out. But now that Harry saw them assembling all over the mountainside, he had to wonder how long he had before they did try. But at the same time, he also knew that he had one piece of very important and very surprising leverage over the authorities. And that was that over the past couple of days, Harry's refusal to leave his wilderness home just because the government told him to had turned him into a media attraction. Reporters had heard about what was going on and they'd started coming to his house. Now, usually, Harry just did not like the press. Even though he clearly listened to the news himself, he still thought of the press, thought of the media like they were vultures, always looking for dead meat and chaos. But Harry also really liked to talk, and he had a lot of very strong opinions. And now, seeing his beautiful lake inundated by outsiders, Harry realized he had to take full advantage of this media interest in him if he wanted to stay in his home. Because the way he saw it was, the government could really not make him do anything against his will if the whole world was watching. So over the next month, Harry gave a lot of interviews. And pretty quickly, he became kind of an international celebrity. He was this single older man standing up to something way bigger and way more powerful, which was sort of admirable, although people didn't really understand it, but it was still a big story. It was very interesting. But more than that, it seemed like the public just sort of liked Harry. In his interviews, Harry would swear and yell and rant and rave and tell reporters about how no authority figure would dare try to get him out of his house.
Back in the 90s, when they started doing embryo...
Oh, I'm so sorry, baby. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna leave? Damn right I'm not gonna leave. I'm gonna stay here. Damn right, this is my home. This is gonna have to come and get me. And no authority can take me out of here. No authority dare.
And he'd also talk about his life, just telling these crazy stories that had nothing to do with the wilderness, like about the whiskey that he'd bottled and distilled during his Prohibition days, which he called Panther Pee, and about his relationship with his late wife and how they used to dance together at the edge of the lake, or his war stories from World War I. I mean, this guy was just really quite fascinating. And so by the time May rolled around that year, Harry went from being bombarded by the government to being bombarded by the media. Today, this would be like going crazy viral, where everybody's seeing you on their feed. But this is 1980, and so people got their news from newspapers and the television and the radio. But those mediums were all full of Harry, and people were kind of obsessed. Everybody from average citizens to school kids sent Harry fan mail, and reporters and news crews came to Harry's in droves, and some even took helicopters just to get there more quickly. And Harry, if he was being honest, he sort of relished all the attention. A few months earlier, he'd been happy with his quiet life, no phone, and he just had his 1,000 cats for company. But now, it's like the whole world cared about him, and it was pretty cool. A few weeks later, though, everything changed. On Sunday, May 18th, the sun came up on Harry's lodge, and the woods around it were totally quiet for the first time in weeks, because Harry, in some ways, had won. He had kept his word, and he'd stayed strong and refused to give in to the government's demands to leave. And finally, the government had backed down. And the sheriff had even come by the day before to tell Harry that, okay, no one's going to come by and ask you to leave anymore. It's on you. And so now, on May 18th...
I just picked up a death prophecy for some of these karmics. Especially those that were playing dark spell work, in particular death varieties. It's not good for them.
As Harry was getting up, it was just him, the lake, the trees, and the big, beautiful mountain. And then, at 8:32 a.m. that morning, a deafening boom shook the earth. It would turn out the media was not totally finished with the story of Harry R. Truman. In fact, what happened on the morning of May 18th, 1980, would in many ways make Harry even more famous than he already was, because Harry didn't live at the base of just any old mountain. His lodge was situated directly at the foot of Mount St. Helens, which was an active volcano. The government operation that the federal agents and local law enforcement were trying to run here was an evacuation. They were not trying to impede on Harry's rights. They were trying to save him. But Harry was so convinced that the land he loved so much, that he had lived on for nearly 60 years, would not hurt him. And so he ignored the authorities' repeated warnings. But Harry's decision was the wrong one. And on May 18th, he paid for his mistake. Because that morning, Mount St. Helens erupted, sending an avalanche of searing lava and mud directly onto Spirit Lake and Harry's lodge, killing him and his cats instantly. His remains were never found. 57 people died during this eruption, including Harry. Today, in that area, Harry has both a trail and a ridge that are named after him. So in a way, he remains a part of the mountain that he loves so much.
Wow.
Thank you so much for watching.
I noticed a lot of parallels between the crimes that we've been calling out, that I've been calling out here, and some of them in the case here today, between people not listening to good advice. Really, it was good advice. People playing feign empathy, pretending like they're innocent when we all know that they're guilty, and so are they. With that being said, my darlings, and without further ado, please remember to pray. Do no harm, take no crap, and I will catch you on the next one. Sweet dreams. Grand Rising, thanks for being here. Thanks for being you.